Hi, this is Marcus Pulis, and this is Aquarian Anarchy. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that is hitting home right now and has me very uncomfortable. You will have noticed that the cover of this has a picture of Julian Assange on it. A couple weeks ago, he was detained and basically kicked out of the Ecuadorian embassy and for the purpose of being delivered over to the American government. I'll get into that in a minute. That is part of a larger problem we're having right now. The state of freedom of speech in this country is in dire straits. It is in a really bad place. Recently, again, several outlets, including We Are Change and InfoWars and ones like that, were deplatformed from Facebook, but were censored again. This isn't the first time. It will likely not be the last time. But what is important is that it is happening. And people will say, well, Facebook is a private organization and they can do whatever they want. Don't you believe in property rights and all of those kinds of things? And the answer to that is you're right. It is a owned sort of by a company, but it's controlled by the government, and it's largely controlled. As Derek Brose has pointed out in multiple articles, I suggest the Conscious Resistance Network for greater details on this, and I'll have a link down below. But they're controlled by the military-industrial complex. I myself have experienced some of the censoring. This is my third YouTube channel. The first one was my own. The second was through Voluntary Visions, which is still up and going. It's just being handled by my friend Michael, who is focusing down on some of the issues that Voluntary Visions does. For me, I'm as a previous video talked about, I'm expanding what I'm thinking about and talking about. But in this particular area, I was targeted, as small as I am, I was targeted pretty specifically by both Facebook and by YouTube for censorship and shadow banning. And I know exactly when it happened because YouTube carries analytics. And several months ago on my own personal YouTube channel, I did an article on the neoconservatives and on war, because if anybody knows me at all, they know I'm very anti-war and therefore very anti-neocon. But before that video, 70% of my views were coming from Facebook. I did that video where I talked extensively about the military-industrial complex, about war, and about specifically the neocons and their control over the American people and over the world at this point. And immediately, I went from 70% of my content coming from Facebook to suddenly zero, none, big goose egg, was coming from Facebook. None, not any. So that was the first thing that hit me with censorship. The second thing that hit me with censorship was a little bit more proof. Through Michael's site, through Voluntary Visions, there is a counter that counts how many views there are. And it is separate from YouTube, but the link that you actually use is a YouTube link. So it is the same video. And there would be no less than 4 times more views on the Voluntary Vision site as there was on the YouTube site. And that is the purpose why Michael and I started Voluntary Visions. I suggest you go to that. It's voluntarywisionsmedia.com, and you can investigate what a voluntarist social media platform with no censorship looks like. Still in beta, he's still developing it. But that brings me to the current situation and Assange. What they're doing is they're doing everything they can to consolidate power and information. They're getting the information that it used to be, recently, was accessible to anybody on YouTube, on the web, whatever, and they are restricting, and by they I mean the government and the corporations and powers that control everything that we are, because the left and right like to, which I don't believe in either of those, left and right like to talk about who's causing all these troubles and trying to enslave us. And the right will talk about that the government is trying to enslave us, and the left will talk about that the corporations are trying to enslave us. The truth is they are both trying to enslave us because they are the same people. These aren't different people. They go back and forth within government and private institutions that are protected by government constantly. They're the same. So it is freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom to bring grievance to your government. All those freedoms that are encapsulated in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And I'm not a big proponent of the Constitution, but the intent of that, when Patrick Henry stood up and made a big fuss about the rights and got the First Amendment, among others, through the 10th Amendment included in the Constitution. He would have had many more, but that's for another discussion. Many of the things that are enshrined, if you will, in that magical document was what they're stripping away. And they're using the media themselves to do it. The media is just nothing more than propaganda. John Adams wrote, "Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people." Thomas Jefferson said, "Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost." I could go on and on and on about these freedom fighters from the past that have had things to say. Julian Assange himself at Oslo Freedom Forum in 2010 said, quote, "It is impossible to correct abuses unless we know they are going on." The following bit of information is going to be largely known by many of you. If you're watching this, more than likely you have a basic idea, but just in case, I'm going to cover the basics of what's going on with Assange. This is from a USA Today article. Wikileaks founder Julian Assange was arrested Thursday to face U.S. charge that he conspired to hack the military computers after Ecuador's government ended his 7 years of self-imposed exile and expelled him from its London embassy. U.S. authorities say Assange conspired with former Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning, who is currently going through her own troubles, check that out as well, to steal and publish huge troves of classified documents. Why are they classified? Why can't we see them? Why is the government holding secrets away from the people? I thought the government was the people. We all know that's bull. Prosecutors said that at one point Assange tried to help Manning crack a password to access military computers where the information was stored. Assange is charged with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, the charge delivered by a federal grand jury in March 2018, but kept secret. Why? Why was it kept secret from the American people? Why don't we need to know about this evil, awful person who's coming after us? It kept secret until that Thursday. It carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. Barry Pollock, a U.S. lawyer for Assange, criticized the arrest and said Assange would need medical treatment that had been denied him for 7 years. Quote, "It is bitterly disappointing that a country would allow someone to whom it has extended citizenship and asylum to be arrested in its embassy," Pollock said. Again, once his health care once his healthcare needs have been addressed, the UK courts will need to resolve what appears to be an unprecedented effort by the United States seeking to extradite a foreign journalist to face criminal charges for publishing truthful information. I'm going to repeat that, truthful information. These aren't lies. These are things that are being kept from the American people. Now, many of the people who like to champion Donald Trump should be very angry with their president. All of those people screaming about Hillary being awful can, in theory, thank Assange for making her information public. Wikileaks was also front and center of the 2016 presidential election for leaking emails hacked from the Democratic National Committee. Same source. In 2016 campaign, Donald Trump said, quote, "I love WikiLeaks." Assange had sheltered in Ecuador's embassy since seeking asylum there in 2012. London's Metropolitan Police moved in after Ecuador formally withdrew its asylum for Assange, an Australian native, and revoked his Ecuadorian citizenship. The same administration that loved WikiLeaks went after him particularly. Typical of government, to the words of Hillary Clinton, to have, quote, "a public and private position." Trump has multiple times shown himself to be just like Clinton. He is no different. There's nothing different between him and Clinton. Coincidentally, the quote above was reported by WikiLeaks. In an article by the New Republic, they lay out how the Trump administration set up Assange. In what is surely just a happy coincidence, this is the New Republic, in what is surely just a happy coincidence, less than 2 months after the government of Ecuador signed an agreement guaranteeing a loan of $4.2 billion from the U.S. controlled International Monetary Fund to that country, Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno revoked the asylum status of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, and the latter was arrested. The IMF loan documents were signed by representatives of the Moreno administration on February 21st, and Assange was dragged out of the country's embassy in London on April 12th. In addition to the $4.2 billion IMF loan, Ecuador's compliance with the U.S. demand that Assange's asylum status be revoked triggered the issuance of another $6 billion from other U.S.-dominated global aid funds such as the World Bank. That's a total of $10.2 billion in cash to a country in desperate need of economic CPR. So they went after him. The Ecuador is just trying to make a buck, and I'm sure they also don't want bombs because they may need liberated, like Venezuela down the way. You know, they may need some tanks to run in to handle stuff that don't give up Assange. The United States, and this is back to the article, the United States not only controls the largest share of the IMF, but pays for the bank's overhead, a bill that amounts to over $164 billion annually. Ironically, it was WikiLeaks that published a document penned by Moreno's administration listing some of the hoops through which Ecuador had to jump before the loan would be approved. From WikiLeaks, these are the people they're silencing. The information reported by WikiLeaks claimed that Ecuador's, quote, handling over Assange and dropping environmental claims against Chevron, end quote, were two of the prerequisites put into place by the Trump administration. They are not for free speech. They are not for freedom. Stop saying that they are. He's not playing a long game. This is not part of the plan. He is a tyrant. The New Republic article goes on to quote an article published in 2016 by the Mises Institute that more or less says that it is impossible for the IMF to be neutral. Quote, look clearly Look, clearly the president was making a joke during the 2016 campaign, end quote. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace about Trump's past praise for WikiLeaks, quote, certainly we take this serious. He was making a joke. So is Assange just a right-wing stooge? Is that what he is? Nope. The left used to love him. In an NPR laid out timeline, here are some of the highlights, and the link will be down below for all of this, as to why. In 2008, in the month of September, 2 months before the U.S. presidential election, WikiLeaks posts leaked emails from the Yahoo account of Republican Vice President contender Sarah Palin. So much for supporting the right. Because, we all know that Sarah's a big lefty. It's not about left and right. It is about truth. In 2009, in November, WikiLeaks posted more than 500,000 page messages it claims were sent on September 11, 2001. They questioned the timeline of 9/11, again going after Bush. In 2010, April, WikiLeaks posted a classified U.S. military video of a U.S. Apache helicopter gunship firing on what the military says were believed to be armed fighters in Baghdad, Iraq. Among the 18 killed were 2 Reuters journalists. The government was shooting down journalists. They were going after them physically with bullets. They were targeting journalists. They have been targeting journalists. They were killing them. This is no different. They're just not using bullets this time. October of the same year, WikiLeaks posts nearly 400,000 classified military documents it calls the Iraq war logs. They detail the involvement of the Iraq security forces in the torture of prisoners of war, document higher civilian death tolls, and describe Iran's support for Iraqi insurgents. Evidently, they are anti-war. I thought the left was supposed to be as well. 2011, February, WikiLeaks posts 7 cables from the U.S. Embassy in Cairo amid violent clashes between Egyptian security forces and pro-democracy demonstrators. The documents discuss Egypt's human rights and civil liberties violations. Aren't liberals supposed to champion civil rights? In 2013, throughout the year, WikiLeaks posts leaked documents detailing the private negotiations for major trade deals, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. So, should we pass that before we know what's in it? Apparently, yes. In 2015, in July, WikiLeaks begins posting leaked National Security Agency documents revealing American surveillance of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President François Hollande, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, as well as 2 prime ministers in Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu and Italy's Silvio Berlusconi. Aren't those U.S. friends? And we're spying on him. And WikiLeaks brought it out. In 2017, WikiLeaks starts posting what it calls Vault 7, which it claims to be a collection of thousands of internal Central Intelligence Agency documents that detail a covert hacking program carried out by the agency, as well as malware and software it uses to spy on smart TVs, the operating systems of most smartphones and web browsers. I can't keep up. Is this a left or the right that protects privacy today? I can't remember because they change so often. September, WikiLeaks starts posting the first of what it says are 650,000 leaked critical documents from the surveillance contractors working in a Russia ruled by President Vladimir Putin. Shouldn't that get help to the Mueller investigation? So this is not about the left and right divide and conquer tactics. This is a journalist doing his job. The government does not want you to see that. Lysander Spooner said, "Those who are capable of tyranny are capable of perjury to sustain it. Our tyrannical government is busy covering up their lies to preserve their tyranny." All of this again proves that this quote from Murray Rothbard, quote, "The state is an inherently illegitimate institution of organized aggression, of organized and regulated crime against the persons and properties of its subjects, a profoundly antisocial institution which lives parasitically off the productive activities of private citizens," end quote. So, what they're doing by going after Julian Assange and by getting Julian Assange, and they will get Snowden, and they will get any of these whistleblowers and journalists and people who are fighting for freedom, because that's what they oppose. They oppose freedom, freedom of speech, they oppose freedom of thought, freedom of movement, they oppose it all, because that's what governments do. In closing, I have a quote again by Lysander Spooner that I thought was pretty obvious in this context. It is, "In the midst of this endless variety of opinion, what man, or what body of men, has the right to say, in regard to any particular action or course of actions, quote, 'We have tried this experiment and determined every question involved in it. We have determined it not only for ourselves, but all others, question mark. And as to all those who are weaker than we will coerce them to act in obedience to our conclusions, question mark. We will suffer no further experiment or inquiry by anyone, and consequently no further acquisition of knowledge by anyone," end quote. Who are these men who have the right to say this, he says. Certainly there are none such. The men who really do say it are either shameless impostors and tyrants who would stop the progress of knowledge and usurp absolute control over the minds and bodies of their fellow men, and are therefore to be resisted instantly, and to the last extent, or they are themselves too ignorant of their own weakness and of their true relation to other men to be entitled to any other consideration than sheer pity or contempt. Thoughts, ideas, words may be wrong once in a while. You may say something you didn't mean. You may lie. All speech, all thoughts should be protected because they are a natural right. You own yourself, and you have a right to those. Julian Assange is a champion. He should be protected. Free him now. Free him now. Free him now. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and if you would, buy a t-shirt from my store. Links are down below. You'll find very soon a free Assange t-shirt from Anarchy. Stay free.